Hey guys, Dr. Justin Marcanjani here. We have Evan Brand in the house. Evan, man, it's been a while. What's going on, dude?
Oh, doing really well, man. We're going to talk
Excellent.
about gut and mood issues,
Yes.
specifically anxiety. I mean, there's so many people on antidepressants, anti anxiety meds, and really, if they fix their gut, they might not have to be on those. So, I'm not saying stop your pharmaceuticals, let's be clear, but the truth is, most people that we see that have mood issues, there's a gut component. So, that's what you and I are going to unpack today. We'll talk about testing strategy, supplement strategy. How do you fix this thing? Because unfortunately, your psychiatrist, they're probably not going to run a stool test on you.
110%. I mean, when you look at most issues with mood, and that kind of is a broad umbrella. We could put irritability, we could put depression, we could put anxiety. It's mostly going to be handled in a couple of ways. Anxiety things, you're going to be throwing benzos for the most part, right? Benzodiazepines, Xanax, um, lorazepam, those
Yeah, I
type of
see.
benzo type of medications, Ativan. And then you have your SSRIs, which are going to be your antidepressants, whether it's Lexapro. Then you're going to have, I'm pretty sure, your SNRI medications that work more on the reuptake and impacts of dopamine. I think Wellbutrin's in that camp as well. I don't have the exact medication names because it's always new ones and there's generics. But you have your SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, your SNRIs, which NRI, norepinephrine, and dopamine are kind of connected. And then you have your GABA type of medication, which are your benzos. I think those are your big ones. You have the old antidepressants from the 80s, the tricyclics. You have those. Is there anything else you want to highlight on the mood side?
Yeah, the Effexor, that's the one you're thinking. The SNRI, that's the popular one there. Effexor, that's
Yep.
Venlafaxine. Amazing how they come up with all these names, and none of these are root cause. And unfortunately, people generally go as far as doing the medication. Maybe they try to hit the gym and they notice, hey, when I exercise, there's definitely a mood exercise connection. So I do want to give some free credit to the free exercise piece of helping your mood, but overall, that's as far as it goes for people. And they don't have a clue that the dysbiosis, the reflux, the diarrhea, the constipation, the gut pain, the skin issues, the eczema, the athlete's foot, the toenail fungus, the UTIs, the vaginal yeast problems, they don't make the connection that those things are giving us clues. That's a window. These other symptoms are a window into what's happening up in the brain. So if we hear someone that says, hey, I have these gut complaints, intestinal cramping, diarrhea. I also have toenail fungus. I have sugar cravings. I have thrush on my tongue. And by the way, I have anxiety. We're going to go, oh, smokes. Well, this is all totally connected.
100%. Got to get to the root issue. And then we can also throw birth control pills in there as well, because if you have a lot of hormonal issues and that those hormones are impacting your mood and focus, especially if you can kind of link it up to PMDD stuff, which is like hormonal kind of mood symptoms to the extreme mood, extreme fluctuation, extreme depression, those kind of issues, then of course, antidepressants would also be recommended. I'm sorry, birth control pills would also be recommended to kind of shut down the cycle and to regulate some of these huge hormonal swings. So that's definitely something to keep in mind too.
Well, how about doing both then? You're on Lexapro, you're on birth
Yep.
control. Sounds like a perfect nasty combo to not feel well.
Yeah. And then you may also be on a PPI because you have poor digestion. And then that forever alters your ability to break down protein and good fats optimally. And these are the building blocks to make a lot of your neurotransmitters. People forget that serotonin and dopamine and norepinephrine, epinephrine, these are all come from amino acids. And so if you don't have good protein digestion, these amino acids building blocks are going to impair the actual raw material and the making of these neurochemicals. And then also hormones have moods. Hormones have a major impact on your mood. So you have neurotransmitters up top. That's more in the brain. These neurotransmitters then help you with FSH and LH and cortisol and a lot of downstream signaling with cortisol, with DHEA, with progesterone, with estrogen. And we know progesterone is a natural GABA chloride channel opener, kind of how benzos work. So progesterone has very calming and relaxing effects. We know that most people today are more estrogen dominant. That progesterone is skewed downward because progesterone can pinch hit for cortisol. So the more stressed and inflamed you are, you're going to take that progesterone downstream. So now your natural benzo, right, your natural Xanax, if you will, is now dropping. So now you're more stressed. And then if those progesterone drops out soon in your cycle, you may have a lot of extreme PMDD, mood, of course, PMS, heavy bleeding, breast tenderness, back pain, cramping, right? The list goes on. So you have to look at the neurotransmitters upstream. They help with your HPA, HPT, HPG axis. That's talking to your adrenals, your thyroid, your gonads. That signaling helps with the LH, FSH, and that's how your hormones produce hormones as well. You need that good signaling upstream.
Yeah, and this gets worse by the time you're age 35, 40, 45, 50, and you've been chronically stressed and imbalanced for 20, 30 years. This is going to compound. So women may be thinking, well, why was I fine when I was 18? Now I'm 46 and I'm anxious all the time. I'm stressed all the time. Well, you likely did
Bingo.
some of that progesterone steal that you're describing to
Yep.
deal with the cortisol of raising children and managing a household and keeping up with the dishes. You did that for 20 years, and now you've essentially, for lack of a better word, you've kind of burned yourself out. And so, where do we start with these people? Well, you mentioned hormones, so we can look at that via saliva. You can do urine, but then the gut piece is where I really want to focus, because I've seen cases where people are so depressed and anxious. All we do is get them on a gut protocol. We're not even giving any mood support, so to speak, and all of a sudden they're like, I'm not depressed anymore. I'm like, wait a second. What do you mean you're not depressed? Like, at first it was shocking. It was like, really? Because I look back, I'm like, well, surely I put in some amino acids. Maybe we did tyrosine, we did phenylalanine, we did 5-HTP. And I look and I'm like, no, we actually didn't do any mood support. This is crazy. And then I started seeing it over and over again. And you and I have poked through the research on this, so we won't bore people right now with it. But the specific probiotic strains that we use, those help too. So not only are we trying to address this bacterial imbalance, this dysbiosis equation that's making toxins, but now if we're putting probiotics in, it's like we're getting a 2-for-1. We're fixing the gut bugs and reseeding with good ones. And now the anxiety just plummets.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that we can do. We talked about proteins and how that impacts the raw material and the building blocks for our neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters help make that chemical signal from neuron to neuron. So we need the neurochemicals there. The building blocks are protein, the raw material of our brain. Guess what? It's cholesterol and fat. So if you're low fat, low protein, vegan, vegetarian, you're going to have mood issues. You're going to have depression issues. Okay. Also, we have to break all those things down. So just like you said, we have the gut absorption. We have hydrochloric acid, enzymes, and bile salts that help break all those things down. And then we have to absorb it. So what you just said regarding the gut, if we have microbes that are impeding absorption, gut bugs, H. pylori, dysbiosis, SIBO, parasites, that's going to impact the absorption. And then what you just said, you kind of highlighted probiotics. Probiotics have a major influence on the immune system, on gut permeability, in inflammation. And a lot of the newer antidepressants and mood drugs that are in the pipeline, instead of working on like reuptake and inhibition, like SNRIs or SSRIs, they're working on reducing inflammation in the brain. So we know that inflammation plays a major role because that activates microglial cells. These are the immune cells in the brain. And when they are activated, you start activating them. It goes pop, 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 pop. As more of them start getting activated, and that can cause brain fog and mood issues because when you have inflammation in the brain, your cells don't work optimally.
Amazing. So the future drugs may be more root cause in a way. They may be more anti-inflammatory, but still there's got to be some negative effects with that. So,
Well, yeah, the problem is almost all drugs, when you look at the mechanism, they kind of either block some kind of enzyme or inhibit some kind of pathway from occurring.
yeah.
So if you go look at PPIs, proton pump inhibitors, or SRIs, right? SRIs, you look at ACE inhibitors, right? So if you look at the medication, themes are they do not upregulate physiology. And the problem is, you go back to certain drugs, let's say in the early 2000s, let's say Vioxx, for instance, those medications were COX-2 inhibitors. So COX stands for cyclooxygenase 2. Well, that enzyme was a really important enzyme that increased inflammation, but that enzyme was also needed for heart and gut lining rebuilding. And so when you block that, yeah, the drug worked, but it caused 60,000 deaths due to ulcers and cardiovascular incidents because that enzyme was so important for rebuilding that tissue. So this is why drugs, you got to be very, very careful with them because of the side effects. Because when you block and inhibit a pathway over here, something can happen over there.
Yeah. Amazing.
And 1/3 of all FDA approved drugs end up getting pulled after the fact. So just because you got FDA approval, guess what Vioxx did? And it killed almost 100,000. I think it was Merck's drug, and I think they paid billions of dollars in fines for that. That's just, that's just true facts right there. And so you got to know that because it's FDA approved may not be the thing. So we like to do tried and true methods that really work on reducing inflammation. Of course, diet, number one. We can use curcumin / turmeric. We can use boswellia, white willow bark. We can use systemic enzymes like nattokinase and serrapeptidase and lumbrokinase and bromelain. So there's a lot of natural higher dose fish oil, keeping really good omega-3 fats in there, getting more meat that's grass-fed and pasture-fed and less linoleic, omega-6 fats. These are a lot of good things that we can look at.
Yeah, so the diet piece is
Huge.
critical. Most people that come to us, truthfully, they're already doing that. They've already explored diet. Most of them have some experience with cleaning up their diet. So usually we're not wasting too much of our breath on the whole gluten and dairy thing.
Well,
But
I had a patient
sometimes
last
we are.
week, though. I had a patient last week. He said, "Hey, I just want to do this thing over here with this protocol, but I don't want to touch my diet." And I'm like, "Okay, that's like you want an addition put on your second floor to your house, but your foundation's cracked.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that may actually cause the foundation in the house to tip over, right? So you have to really build that foundation. And of course, if you're adding on to your house, you even more have to make sure that foundation is solid."
Yeah, agreed,
Yeah.
agreed. And then on the gut piece, you can look at urine for organic acids. We can measure
Yes.
dysbiosis there. We could do stool testing at home. And this is more accurate than what you're going to get at a hospital. So, for example, if you came back from Mexico, you had food poisoning, you end up in the ER, they run some stool test on you. If you can get them to do that there, maybe the tropical disease specialist comes in and takes a look at you.
Yep.
Truthfully, their testing is outdated and not as sensitive as what you and I are using.
Exactly.
So,
100%.
these people are frustrated when they get to us because they said, well, I've already been tested by the gastro. They ruled everything out. And I'm like, well, they ruled everything out according to their testing. But with these more advanced sensitive tests, we find things that supposedly aren't there. And then with that data, we don't have to guess. Now we can actually make a specific protocol we've done thousands of times to address these bugs. So get the data, get the data, get the data. If that's one thing you take from today, if you have mood issues, get your testing done. You can reach out to Dr. J and do it. You can reach out to me. We can run these labs, get the results in a couple of weeks, and provide more answers than you've seen by visiting 20 different conventional medical practitioners, even Mayo Clinic. They're not actually doing that good of a job. I've seen the protocols that they're doing. They're helping people rule stuff out. Like I had a lady who she got an MRI. They were worried about something in her brain and they say, nope, nothing there and nothing we can do. I said, did they talk to you about diet? No. Did they talk about your gut? No. Did they talk about supplements? No. I'm like, well, what'd they do? They just said, well, just keep an eye on you. I'm like, okay, great.
Yeah, a lot of these people, you think, oh, I'm going to go to Mayo Clinic or Cleveland Clinic. I mean, a lot of times they're good at ruling out kind of weird genetic or pathological issues, even genetic stuff. I tell patients, if it's genetic, if it truly is genetic, it would be caught at birth. It'd be Tay-Sachs, it'd be trisomy 21, it'd be Huntington's disease. It'd be something typically caught at birth. But when you're finding things out 30, 40, 50 years of age, it's more epigenetic, meaning you have genetic triggers that are in effect, stressors, diet, lifestyle, inflammation, and these are then activating genes. So it's not that you have a genetic, code that is active right away and you can't change it. It's more epigenetic. And if it's epigenetic, that's the light switch going on and off. So think of the DNA as like the electrical wiring that's already there. Think of the epigenetics is the switch that you can flip. Hardwiring is there. We can't change that, but we can change if the switch is on or off. And so most times people say, oh, it's genetic at 40 or 50 years old. It's really epigenetic, and we have the control over that. And so then what's the steps that control the epigenetics? And that's where functional medicine works amazing, and that's where conventional medicine drops the ball.
Yeah, well said. And you can come in with tools like we can do GABA, we can do taurine,
Yep.
inositol. We can do things like magnesium threonate to calm the
L-theanine,
system.
L-theanine,
Here's the thing
Epsom
though.
salt foot baths.
What if you stop there though? See, the naturopathic approach is going to stop you there. They're going to say,
A lot of
okay,
times.
take your theanine, take your GABA, hope you
Yep.
feel better.
And again, the difference is you have supplements and nutrients and amino acids and herbs. And if you don't have the right philosophy, that could still be allopathic in a way because you're still not fixing the underlying issue. Now, I like this at least better because you're not killing 60,000 people a year like Vioxx did, or you're not getting people hooked on benzos where it's very difficult to get them off once they've been on for years and years and years. So I do like it from that standpoint. But now if we start looking at their diet and we look at dysglycemia and blood sugar issues, we look at sleep, we look at their gut, we look at their hormones, we look at toxicity and mold. Now we're really having a holistic approach. And now we can plug these tools into a holistic approach that actually gets to the root underlying issue.
Cost wise, this doesn't have to be insane. People may hear all this and think this sounds crazy and you're not able to do it. But I've seen people on $5,000 and $10,000 programs from naturopathic practitioners, and I look at the program and there's nothing to it. It's just some enzymes and maybe some
Yeah.
ginger, like you said, turmeric. I'm like, that program was $5,000. That's all it was. Like, where's the
Yeah.
root cause? What is your
Yep.
goal? And they're like, well, we didn't really have a goal. It was just try to get the anxiety down. I'm like, well, you are not gonna, like, you could take this protocol here for 20 years and not fix the issues. I tell people that all the time. Like, it could be vitamin D, K, E, magnesium, enzymes. I'm like, okay, great, but like, you've got mold off the charts. That's why you're anxious. Like,
Bingo.
you're not going to fix it with this protocol.
Yeah, and I tell patients, for me, it's the SSS approach. The last S in the three is symptoms, and most people, they just stay there and they spot treat symptoms with drug. Oh, pain, NSAID. Oh, depression, SSRI. Oh, digestive issues, proton pump inhibitor, right? Or you could plug in, oh, I'm going to just give you some HCl, or I'm going to just give you some turmeric, right? You can still do that there a little bit. Now you go upstream to the body systems. So that now we're starting to get more holistic in functional medicine. The body systems are going to be digestive, immune, right? Detoxification, hormone, lymphatic, right? So now we can look at the systems and we can run tests to see how the function of these systems are. And then we go one step up. The first S, which is going to be stressors, we're going to look at those physical, chemical, emotional stressors. Tell me about where you live. Is there any mold or environmental toxins? Do you have an issue with gluten? Blood sugar issues. So now we're going to look at emotional stress. So now we're going to look at the physical, chemical, emotional stressors. We're going to see how they impacted your body systems, right? And then, of course, we'll also work on support down here, but we'll make sure the above two things, stressors and systems, are supported.
And this works. I mean, you and I are doing well. I mean, we've got stress load with dealing with our kids and trying to be good fathers and good
Mm-hmm.
practitioners.
Mm-hmm.
And we're practicing what we preach. And the stuff we do clinically, we do personally. And so that's what's allowed us to do this now for, combined over 20 years between us
Yep.
both. This
Oh,
is
yeah.
helping lots of people. And I don't see you or I slowing down,
Yeah.
because this is addicting and fun. And it's truly, I hope that it's going to be something on the street corner that people are talking about. I think people are waking up. They don't want to be on these meds for anxiety. They don't want to be on the meds for depression. They know that it's digging themselves deeper in the hole, but still the stuff we talk about is still not like grocery store checkout line conversation yet.
Yep. So on the gut side, we have probiotics, which can be helpful. But if you have SIBO or probiotic intolerance, like you get bloated or gassy or foggy with like fermented foods or probiotics, then we really have to work on cleaning out the gut. So some of these things we mentioned that could help, they may also make you worse too. And that's where you have to have that functional medicine kind of detective hat to kind of dig in deeper. You have to look at the gut. You have to look at the absorption. You have to look at all your digestive nutrients to break things down, to look at the dysglycemia. Just blood sugar issues going up and down can cause energy and mood issues. And then, of course, you have to look at the female hormones. And like Evan said, are you living in a moldy apartment? Do you have a history of heavy metal exposure? All these things can matter. And so you want to kind of create that audit list, because what we're really good at is someone comes to you and they have a whole list of potential issues. Well, how do you address that? So I always use Occam's razor. Like, what's the most likely? What's the most likely situation? Right? A patient comes to me one time and she's like, "Oh, I got a headache. So this weekend I went to get an MRI because I thought I had a brain tumor." It's like, no, that's not how any of this works. Like, first thing I would say is, were you hydrated? Were you getting electrolytes? Did you skip any meals? Are you eating protein and fat at each meal? And of course, when I asked a couple of those things, she's like, "Oh yeah, I didn't hydrate that much. I had some alcohol the night before. I didn't eat any protein." So it's like, of course, right? So we go to like the most likely and the least invasive to the least likely and to the most invasive. So we always do it in that order. That way the patient, one, gets better fastest, and the least expense and the least level of invasiveness.
Yeah, those are always interesting cases. It's always the female with the anxiety who goes headache, brain tumor. Oh my god.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah. Or someone that has a tummy issue. I have a tumor. I have an ulcer. It's like, well, could just have some gastritis, could just have some general inflammation, could just have some indigestion. And, look at the history. And it's nice to have tests like the GI map where we can look at blood in the stool. We can see eosinophilic protein. We can look at calprotectin. So we can see how good or bad the gut is doing from an inflammatory or immune standpoint. So we have tools to assess that.
Yeah, so if you have health anxiety, the best thing you can do is to get data, get some of this clinical data, not necessarily an MRI. I did have one female client in her 70s. She had breast cancer many years ago. She ended up having brain cancer. Like, this was a new case. Got an email a couple weeks ago. Hey, cancer's back. brain tumor this time. I'm like, oh, this is terrible. So in her case, MRI came through, but she had a massive, terrible health history. So like you're saying, we don't want people to just be having some baseline headache, anxiety, and go straight to brain tumor. Like, get the data with us first, and we'll let you know if something's not right and you need to investigate further. I mean, I know you and I both have seen cases on the stool where we're going to see massive amounts of inflammation and bleeding, and we go, hey, look, maybe you do need to get that colonoscopy. But to run off right away for that sometimes is unnecessary based on us looking at 5 to 30 different biomarkers that indicate intestinal health. We're going to look at that first.
Yeah, most people that I have seen, and you probably have a similar experience, especially if they have some chronic health issues, they've probably already seen a lot of conventional allopathic doctors, and they probably haven't gotten the results they want. They've probably already been failed by them in their eyes. Like,
Yeah.
hey, I couldn't get better. I've been doing this for years. They're putting me on this drug, this drug, this drug. These are my options with them. And I'm just like, I want something different. And so most people, they've already kind of been ruled out to that level of degree. And, I see patients with blood in their stool and they go to their gastro and they're like, yeah, you have some IBD and Crohn's. And they're not overly worried besides, hey, let's give you maybe Lialda, mesalamine, or a biologic, and let's try to get the prednisone, get the inflammation down. But that's it. And it's like, well, what about upregulating physiology and microbiome and bacteria and infections and low hydrochloric acid enzymes and bile and leaky gut and zonulin? Like those things don't even like enter the equation. They're all over their head.
I know. Isn't that shocking? Still
It
in
is.
2023, still like 1980s, or I don't even know what decade it would be.
Well, I mean, it's the whole insurance industry. Basically, when you have 5 or 6 minutes to work with a patient, I mean, you can't even ask enough questions just to hammer down, is their environment moldy in
Yeah,
5 or 6 minutes, let alone get their whole workup in,
true,
you
true.
know?
The
You go
system
through
is
and you're like,
not.
hey, do you have any history of water leaks? What's the humidity in your basement like? Do you have any foundation? Time you figure that, time to go.
I'm late for my next one. I got
I
20
know.
others in the waiting room
I
today.
know.
Oh, yeah. So I mean, you and I are we're zooming in more because that's what's truly helping get people better. So I encourage you, get the data, get the data, get the data. If you need help, reach out. We're going to do this again next week too. We can go
Yep,
deeper into gut
we
or
will.
anxiety. If you all have questions or topics you'd like us to cover, you could always go. I know Dr. J publishes these on his Justin Health
Yep,
YouTube channel. So if you go on there and you add some comments, things you want to hear about, questions.
yep.
We had a couple of questions come in about keto and anxiety, also what to do with blasto diverticulitis. So we could definitely cover those.
Those are great. Absolutely. And if you guys are listening and you've been on antidepressants, benzodiazepines, SSRIs, please do not just come off them. If you've just been prescribed them and you want to come off, talk to your doctor that just prescribed them and see if they can taper you off. If you've only been on a very short period of time, you could probably get off pretty fast as long as it's not something that was prescribed because you were suicidal or something overtly serious. But always go back to that prescriber so they can manage that taper. If you've been on for years, most prescribers still pull patients off too fast, especially with benzos. You may need a 6 month to a year taper. And I always tell patients, get the foundation right with your diet, lifestyle, supplementation, gut, and then go back to your prescriber and then say, hey, just slowly taper that off, usually over 6 months to a year. Know what the side effects are, and then watch them and just go really slow with that. Okay. But always go back to that prescriber. Never just do it willy nilly, and always do it with a foundation underneath you and then taper versus like, my blood sugar's terrible, my gut sleep's awful, I'm going to just come off. No, don't do that. Just be responsible in how you do it
Agreed.
and
Amen
let
to
the
that.
prescriber know.
Amen to that. If you need help clinically, you can reach out. We work with people around the world. JustinHealth.com. That's for Dr. J. Consults, lab testing is available worldwide. We're experts at this. Domestic, international, the logistics don't matter. We always figured out to help you guys, even in the nook and crannies of the earth. And
Yes.
if you want to reach out to me, it's evanbrand.com. You can reach out. We're happy to help you guys.
Excellent. Yes. Very good. And then we didn't touch upon any of the emotional stuff. So like EFT or NLP or EMDR. So today's podcast really wasn't going into that aspect. We were more looking at the physiological things regarding gut and hormones and such. So just there's a whole other layer on top of that though, but we'll put that for our second podcast.
Yeah, part 2, tips and
Part two.
tricks. Yeah, let's do it.
Excellent. All right, Evan. Great chatting with you, man. You have a good one. Take
You
care,
too.
everyone.
Take
Bye,
care.
y'all.